My name is Dan Cole. I'm giving this talk. This is based on a paper that Richard Hart and I published earlier this year in the International Journal of Geoinformation. In recent years, many libraries and archives have started digitizing their collections, thus making maps by Indigenous peoples more easily available to study. While a number of these maps were discussed in the History of Cartography series, more have since been found and disseminated. Further, Indigenous claims to land can be seen in their connections via toponymy. European concepts of territory and political boundaries did not coincide with First Nation American Indian views, resulting in the mistaken view that natives did not have formal concepts of their territories. This presentation will illustrate how native residents were very spatially aware of their own lands, and we will present how the Sinixt toponymy helped build their legal case. Okay, from the start, European mapmakers relied on native informants, as can be seen in Samuel de Champlain's map of New France here. And later, this was analyzed by Herman and Pierce, who mapped out Champlain's travels from the Gulf of St. Lawrence to Georgian Bay with notes from Champlain, imagined notes from Indian voices, and cartographer's notes. The title, "They Would Not Take Me There," is indicative of Champlain's desire to find a route to James Bay. On Smith's map, crosses, which are marked with red dots here, are placed to indicate the limits of his travel. Beyond those crosses were named Indian territories and towns provided by his native informants. One of the earliest surviving native maps in North America is in the southeast, the Catawba deerskin map, which abstractly in 1720 encompassed the social and trade network of Catawba, along with those of her native and English neighbors. Map of several nations of Indians to the northwest of South Carolina. In 1752, Philip Bausch compiled two maps on one sheet, including a possible water route from Lake Superior to the Pacific from Ochagach. This is the map that he copied from Ochagach, and this is the compilation that Bausch put together and published. The upper map is a copy of the manuscript map by a French officer, which in turn was compiled from Ochagach, who was a Cree Indian. The lower map is a synthesis of Bausch of two previously unpublished manuscript maps drawn by French fur traders working in the region in the 1730s, who in turn got a lot of information by native informants. This map, later on by Chegaray in 1755, drafted of the Ohio River Valley from his travels from Lake Erie to the Mississippi River down the Ohio, was created for the British as intelligence information at the start of the French and Indian War, with indications of a French fort, Indian settlements, and distances. At the same time, you had an unidentified Indian scout provided lots of help to John Montresor for this battlefield at Monongahela. Redhead, who was in the Onondaga in 1759, created the sketch map from Lake Ontario to Montreal. As Malcolm Lewis noted, this provided valuable intelligence, not the least of which for its relatively detailed representation of various bays at the eastern extremity of Lake Ontario and possible routes from there to the La Galette or Oswegatchie on the draft that avoided the treacherous Thousand Islands reach of the main river. The strategic intelligence on the map included locations of Indian settlements, French forts, carrying places around rapids and Indian footpaths. Here in 1766 was a unique map because most Euro-American maps either tended to ignore the presence of Indigenous peoples or treated them as an addendum. This was a particular exemption created by John Gerard William de Braun, who mapped the Indian nations of the Southern Department in 1766. Although the underlying base map is more of a sketch than many of its contemporaries, the map contains a wealth of information on native toponymy of Indian towns and territories, although the latter has the anglicized versions of the tribal names. In 1767, you have two native cartographers, Matanabe and Idalitzzi, who were Chippewayan, mapped this very large area of Canada for the Hudson Bay Company from the Churchill River north Coronation Gulf and from Hudson Bay to the Great Slave Trade. June Helm spatially analyzed this map, taking note of the extensive distortion on the map. Nevertheless, she marveled at how knowledgeable the two men were of their extensive travels across the landscape, encompassing hydrology and other physical markers. In 1787, this Comanche map depicted an engagement on the Spanish frontier of New Mexico between the Comanche and the Mescalero Apache. This petrographic map documents illustrate the Battle of Sierra Blanca. This map commemorates a special event that the victors wanted to remember, including deaths and injuries of people and horses, along with a number of prisoners taken. Next, you have this map by Akomaki in 1801, from the indicating the drainage network from the Rocky Mountains to the Missouri River. Akomaki, created this map. He was a Blackfoot chief showing his impressive knowledge of the mountains and hydrology. This map was created by Nicholas King in preparation for the Lewis and Clark expedition, with annotations by Meriwether Lewis of additional information from fur traders who in turn obtained information from the Native Americans on Indian villages and territories. This map is found in the French National Library and can be seen in Christopher Steinke's article, who notes that it captures some of the Arika history that Clark left unrecorded. Drawn sometime in 1805 or 1806, it shows the course of the Missouri River, Lewis and Clark in council at the Arika and Mandan villages, the locations of more than 30 different Indian groups and significant places in the history of the Arika people. The Lewis and Clark expedition produced two notable maps in 1805 and 1814 from their exploration. Both maps have extensive demographic information related to the native settlements, large portion of which was far from the expedition's outbound and return routes. The earlier map merely identified the number of warriors or men, but on the latter map, the number of souls were indicated, which likely included women and children. Neither the locations of the settlements nor the numbers of inhabitants could have been shown without the input of Indigenous informants. If you look at a close-up on the 1805 map, here you have a number of men or warriors at various locations, and on the 1814 map, you have the number of souls being indicated. William Gribb, a colleague of mine who's now passed away, plotted out all of the Indigenous locations on the Lewis and Clark map of 1805. And as you can see, quite a few of them are far away from their route. And then he also plotted out the populations based on that map. Okay, William Edward Perry up in the Arctic had significant help from several Inuit when mapping the Arctic coastlines and islands. The one on the left is by Iligalik, who is an Inuit woman, and on the right is one by Uyuwa. On the one map, the settlements included notations on Ukutuk's country and an inhabited area and Esquimaux or Inuit huts with notes from Iligalik, the ships seen from Ukutuk. And here's a close-up of that. The other map had Indigenous place names acknowledging Uwarat, including a note about the limits of Uwarat's geographic knowledge. Additionally, Malcolm Lewis noted that Perry was explicit in his opinion that better quality maps could be obtained from the Inuit by providing a chart of land already known and asked for it to be extended. Okay. Back here we are. Okay, here you have Jero Shunu Waiha's map, who's an Oto Indian, of events in middle Missouri and upper Arkansas rivers. This map illustrates the roots of an Oto war party that attacked Arapaho in the area of the upper Arkansas and upper Cimarron rivers. The events are depicted in typical Indian pictographic style against the network of rivers. Gross distortion of the network reflects the constraints imposed on the Indian by the rectangular sheet of paper. Even so, it's a remarkable map covering 1/3 of a million square miles of the northern and central American plains. Malcolm Lewis then redrafted that map on the left and then transposed it to an accurate map of the hydrology. And you can see how that came out. Also, Malcolm Lewis dealt with Nanching Ningas, who was an Iowa Indian, map of tribal migrations. And you can see here how he copied and transposed the locations from that map onto modern hydrology. Louis Dvorsy discussed this map that was drawn by Indians unnamed on birch bark and then traced by a British officer on paper, who had a backhanded compliment that even the savages can make an intelligible plan. Dvorsy goes on to write that the officer should have been acquainted with the work of Thomas Pownall, who in 1784 praised the geographic and cartographic knowledge of Indians. Okay, in 1843, he had this hydrologic map by Joseph Nicolet, which on the surface of which is nothing extraordinary, although it is a very nice map. But as you zoom in, you'll find that Nicolet included not only the English names of streams and lakes and such, but he also included all the indigenous names of those locations. So we had to have Indian performance for that. Joseph Gregg in 1844 made this map using an Indian informant, showing Indian nations, reservations, hunting grounds, villages, pueblos, trade routes, migratory trails, military expeditions, forts, trading posts, missions, hydrology, and topography. As Bernstein notes, Gregg relied heavily on Comanche chief Tapakena, who drew him the map, which was likely not saved, and which actually portrayed all the major rivers from the Missouri to the Santa Fe, along with a number of Mexican settlements. And I must identify one of the earliest maps based on field maps based on treaty. This map by Pierre-Jean de Smet in 1851 delimits tribal territories pursuant to the Laramie Treaty. This map reflects in many instances a benign effort on the part of the government to map the pro-tribal perspective, although it was not very long before intrusions upon those mapped territories would take place. Yet the map itself is a significant adventure into the cartography of Indian affairs. Here you have a map by Henry Louis Morgan, 1851, of the Iroquois territories in 1720, with the Aboriginal names of their villages, lakes, rivers, streams, ancient localities, and the courses of their principal trails. The mapped ethnography of the Iroquois must have involved a native informant who unfortunately is not acknowledged, but the straight line borders have to be Morgan's invention. Another example of good spatial cognition by Native Americans is on this, drawn by an anonymous Assiniboine warrior in 1853 of the upper Missouri River from North Dakota to central Montana. On the map are notations by Edwin Denig, who read that the artist was not acquainted with the country on the south side of the Missouri. The dotted line is their usual warpath to the Blackfeet. And this indicates that the Assiniboine map was not made to give the Western-oriented period picture of the landscape. Much like the Plains picture writing, it was made to record the warpath on the anonymous brave made of a raid on the Blackfeet in Montana. About the same time, or no, several years later, in 1883, Franz Boas had these sketch maps with plenty of indigenous input for two Frobisher Bay area and of the Baffin Island area that can be found in the anthropological archives of the Smithsonian. Okay. Amos Blackheart Bull created this large-scale map of the setting of the Black Hills Conference it was of 1867, but was created sometime in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it covered quite a bit of the ecosystem as well as the activities that happened in the area. Maps like this do not deal with toponymy per se, rather they use name glyphs to identify Indian and white settlements, military forts, battles, rivers, mountains, and other physical features as they portrayed multiple events occurring within individual spatial frames. Here you have Black Goose's map that was created of the Kiowa Comanche Apache Indian Reservation in the 1890s. Okay, William Meadows put numbers on this map and then transposed all those numbers to a modern road map of southwestern Oklahoma. Okay. The proposed state of Sequoia was created in 1905 to indicate the made on the direction of the Sequoia Statehood Convention. Its significance is a symbol of the Indian resistance to statehood within Oklahoma Territory, and it also relates to the last year's McGirt decision by the Supreme Court dealing with that part of eastern Oklahoma. Moving forward to today, here you have the BIA's geospatial support website, and there are a number of other web pages within that website. This one includes an interactive map of tribal leaders. There are other ones to deal with climate adaptation, et cetera, that the BIA has mapped out. Here you have an interactive map made by Village Earth called the Pine Ridge Land Information System, originally made in 2012 and has since been updated, that tribal residents can then access and find out about their individual allotments. Here you have an interactive story map. It was created by Inuit, Dalhousie University, Dominion Diamond Mines in Canada. That's quite informative. Here you have the Gwynnis Place Names Atlas that allows users to interactively select towns, trails, mountains, rivers, and pop-up text discussing stories related to each feature. And here you have Margaret Pierce's poster map of Indian place names across Canada. As Pierce notes, the map does not depict all of the place names of Canada, nor are all Indigenous nations or communities represented. And there are thousands upon thousands more, ever expanding. And if you zoom in, you can see how a number of these place names with translations are depicted on the map. Okay, here you have the native lands interactive map. This is a screenshot. And this is created by Canadian mapping specialist Victor Temprano, who has mapped also territories of Australia, New Zealand, and he's currently working in South America. But this one is of North America and is continually being peer-reviewed and updated. And he wisely has plenty of overlaps between tribal nations, groups, and bands. Okay, lastly, I'm going to deal with the Sinixt, or a Lakes tribe. They were declared extinct by the Canadian government in 1956, even though on a historic map on the left, the Sinixt show up in this map of British Columbia, and on the right by a map that was done by the British Columbian government showing the Lakes tribe still in existence at that time. Okay, the Sinixt won their court case this spring with the Canadian Supreme Court, declaring them not extinct, and they have since put out this place names map of places that they're familiar with in British Columbia and in Washington State. And that sums it up. Thank you.